Movies in short here. Today, we'll discuss a 2021 drama, thriller movie called Pig. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Rob Feld is a former Portland-based chef turned reclusive truffle forager, following the death of his wife and partner Lori 15 years prior. He washes his plate in the fast-flowing river and then stands alone in the mist, next to the fire on the river bank. There is a sense of deep sadness and solitude. He walks through the forest towards a small wooden cabin. Rob pauses at the open door and whistles. Pig trots towards him, grunting her greeting. He feeds her and she eats appreciatively. Rob commences foraging on the damp forest floor and slowly savors the delicacy he has unearthed. He indicates to Pig that she should follow him. They walk through the forest, with Pig leading the way as the weak sunlight filters through the trees. Rob gently offers Pig a truffle he has unearthed and Pig grunts in acknowledgement. His calm tone as he says have a truffle girl confirms that she is a female so. He continues to harvest truffles as Pig watches and grunts after showing him their location. Rob raises them to his nose and inhales their musty smell with appreciation. Rob praises Pig for her assistance by saying good find girl. They work well together in a symbiotic relationship of companionship, respect and necessity. They return to the small rustic cabin and Rob prepares the flour for a pastry. He places it carefully into the dish while Pig watches him. Rob chops the truffles and adds them to the sizzling oil in the frying pan. He stirs them and cooks them expertly, tasting them as they cook. He adds them to the pastry. He wipes his eyes. We do not know if his tears are caused by the smoke or a sad memory. Pig joins him as he sits on the low wooden veranda and shares the meal with her. As night falls, Pig settles onto her bedding which is placed next to Rob's small bed. Rob gets into his bed and looks at her kindly before they sleep. The following morning Rob sits in the doorway in the gentle daylight as he tends to his mending. The sound of an approaching vehicle playing loud classical music disturbs the absolute quiet of his surroundings. He looks through the window pane and recognizes the car and the driver. As Amir, a young and inexperienced truffle seller, gets out of the car, Pig is there to greet him and gets in his way. The driver tells her no repeatedly, says get away from my car and swears at her. Rob returns to his mending in the doorway. Amir approaches him and greets him. Rob does not respond. Amir eagerly opens the red cooler box and is very impressed with the contents. He raises a truffle to his nose and inhales deeply. Pig grunts beside him. Once again Amir is disrespectful to her as he closes the lid of the red cooler box. Seeing that Rob is dirty and has only the most basic facilities, Amir offers him a camp shower with hot water or at least a phone to use in an emergency. Rob continues mending and pointedly ignores Amir, who states that he does not want to find Rob dead in the cabin on any of his future visits to collect the truffles. Rob stands up to go inside without answering. He whistles for Pig to come into the cabin with him. He closes the cabin door without a word. Amir leaves, sarcastically saying good talk Rob. See you next Thursday asshole. Rob unpacks the red cooler box Amir has given to him, which is filled with basic provisions. He places batteries into a cassette player and thoughtfully selects a cassette called For Robin. He inserts the cassette into the machine and presses play. A young woman's voice is heard laughing and saying go out, I'm trying to surprise you. Rob listens briefly with a deep sadness and switches off the cassette player. He removes the cassette as he is unable to listen to it any longer. He sits pensively at the wooden table and strokes Pig as she approaches him, sensing his sadness. He tells her I'm okay. As they prepare to settle for the night, Pig is very anxious as the coyotes howl in the darkness. Rob reassures her and latches the door. He stabs his hunting knife into the surface of the wooden table and returns the cassette player to its place on the shelf. The coyotes continue to howl eerily in the darkness and the still night. Car lights shine as the vehicle quietly approaches the cabin. Rob breathes deeply in his sleep. Pig gets up and refuses to move away from the door. She wakes Rob with her grunting and does not respond to his call. He gets up and goes to the door to reassure her again and tells her to go to bed. The creaking on the wooden veranda outside alerts him to danger. The door is broken down and Rob is knocked to the floor. Pig squeals in terror as she is abducted from the safety of her home by two unknown people. Rob stands up to remove his knife from the table and shouts at the assailants to let Pig go. He is hit by a steel pipe and falls to the floor again. Rob drags himself towards the window. He sees the glowing rear lights of the vehicle as it drives away before he collapses to the floor. The morning light filters through the open door. Rob is still lying on the floor and has been since the attack the night before. He slowly drags himself up into a sitting position and tries to whistle for Pig. There is no response. Rob goes outside and removes the cover from his old unused truck and pours fuel into the tank. The engine starts with difficulty. He drives slowly forward. The engine cuts out and will not restart. He abandons the car and starts to walk through the remote forest until he reaches a tarred road. He eventually reaches a small diner. Rob asks the waitress if Marge is there and is informed that she died 10 years ago. It's clear that has been living in seclusion for at least a decade. The waitress tells him that he may only use the phone if he is going to order something. Rob says he is not. She evaluates the situation and places the phone on the counter for him to use anyway. Amir arrives at the diner hooting and shouting impatiently. He covers the passenger seat of his car as Rob is dirty and disheveled. He looks at Rob and asks about his injuries. He tells Rob that this is not his problem. Rob angrily informs him that if he wants his truffle supply, then Rob needs his pig. They drive away down the road with classical music blaring. They arrive at a truffle stall in the forest and Amir leads the way. A woman called Mac is counting her money and is not impressed as she does not like buyers coming directly to her site. They ask her if she knows the whereabouts of the couple with the turquoise pickup truck. She looks at Rob, noting his facial injuries and dried blood. When Rob tells her that they stole his truffle pig, she puts someone in charge of her stand, issues a few threats and takes them directly to the couple. The couple deny digging her sites and taking Rob's pig. Mac angrily accuses them of poaching. They then inform her they do not have pig anymore. Rob asks them who has his pig and if they saw the man who stole her. The woman does not know who he was but says he was rich and drove a nice car. Her boyfriend says it was a black waxed car. They say the man was just some city guy. Rob tells Amir to take him to the city as he might know someone in Oregon who knows the industry and could help him find his pig. Amir resists the idea and is very concerned about his reputation. He does not want to be seen publicly with Rob, who is dirty and dressed in old clothes. They drive in silence to Portland. Rob stares out the car window at the buildings and the city lights which he has not seen in years. They arrive at their destination. Rob asks Amir for $10 which he gives him. Rob visits an ex-colleague, Edgar, and hands him a container of truffles. He asks Edgar if he has heard anything about a pig. Edgar is very scornful and tells Rob he has no value and does not exist anymore. Rob leaves without responding. Edgar asks Amir if he knows who Rob really is. Amir is amazed Rob knows Edgar and asks him how. He tells him they know each other because Rob used to live in the area. Amir asks what their plan is and Rob vaguely responds that they will wait until midnight. They drive to an alley and a chef called Dave exits the building and eventually allows them into the restaurant. They walk through the restaurant kitchen. Rob informs Amir they are going to the Hotel Portland, which Amir insists does not exist. Rob tells Amir that he is just his ride and he has no interest in what he thinks. Amir is very verbally abusive, demanding respect, and accuses Rob of bestiality. Rob explains that the hotel was demolished in the 1950s and is now called Pioneer Square. However, the basement of Hotel Portland was just covered up and still exists. It belongs to Edgar. They move the large storage shelves and walk down the metal spiral stairs. Edgar has been running an illegal fight club for restaurant workers in the basement for years. He looks up to see Rob approaching. Rob writes his full name on the wall as a contender. The crowd are shocked as they recognize that the disheveled Rob is actually the famous Portland chef Robin Feld. Bets are placed. Rob removes his jacket and faces a short man in front of him. Rob refuses to retaliate and is beaten to a pulp. When he comes to, Edgar acknowledges his resolve in trying to find his pig and hands him a piece of paper with information on her whereabouts. Amir takes the badly beaten Rob to his home to rest overnight. Rob asks Amir if he can make a lunch reservation at Chef Finway's restaurant called Eurydice. Amir confides in Rob about his childhood and his unhappily married parents. He has a rare happy memory of them after they had been to Rob's restaurant many years ago. He says his mother killed herself. They communicate on a personal level for the first time. Amir works on his sales pitch for the truffles for Finway's restaurant. Rob visits the home he shared with Lori, his deceased wife and business partner. He meets a small boy who lives there now who does not seem to notice or care that Rob is so dirty. Rob and Amir are seated at Eurydice. Rob asks to speak to the chef. Amir is scared his father Darius, who supplies truffles to Eurydice, will hear that he was at the restaurant and assume that Amir is trying to poach his customers. They discuss the dynamics of Amir's relationship with his father Darius. Chef Finway arrives at their table. Amir inquires about the possible inclusion of truffles to their menu, hoping to get their future business. Rob informs head chef Derek Finway that he is looking for a truffle pig. It takes Derek a short while to recognize Rob as the formerly highly acclaimed chef Robin Feld. He greets Rob warmly and notes that Rob has been off the scene for 15 years. He offers Rob medical attention as Rob is still unwashed and bloody from the attack as well as the fight. Rob declines. Derek previously worked briefly for Rob in his restaurant. Rob elaborates regarding Pig and that she was stolen. Rob berates Derek for not following his dream of owning and cooking in a real English pub. Rob insists that he should be true to himself as it is the only thing that matters. Derek pretends he cannot remember their conversation from the past and tries to convince himself that running this high-end contemporary restaurant is his dream. He looks devastated after the conversation, gulping down his glass of wine. Derek insinuates that Darius is responsible for the theft of Pig. Amir is horrified and tries to convince Rob that he really knew nothing about it. Rob demands that Amir take him to his father, Darius. Amir is afraid. Rob is enraged and demands the address as he angrily walks away from Amir. He steals a bicycle and cycles to Darius' home. Amir drives to a building and stands at a doorway in a passage. He speaks to his mother who survived her suicide attempt but is in a coma. A devastated Amir wishes that Darius would allow her to be taken off life support. Rob sits across the table from Darius, who praises his skills as a chef and restaurateur. Darius discusses Amir and his non-existent future in his truffle business. Rob is very angry and demands that Darius give Pig back. Darius offers him $25,000 to walk away from Pig and the truffle business. He warns Rob to stop selling truffles to Amir and threatens to kill Pig. Rob ignores his threats. They discuss their broken lives subsequent to the tragedies of their wives. Darius cruelly tells Rob to buy himself a new pig as he leaves the room. Amir is waiting for him in the driveway. Amir apologizes to Rob for telling his father about him and for the fact that Darius took Pig. Rob informs Amir that he does not need Pig to find truffles. He explains that the trees indicate where to look. He wants to find Pig because he loves her. Rob gives Amir a list and asks him to get everything. Amir questions what they are doing and Rob replies that they are getting his pig back. Rob looks through the window pane at a woman in a bakery. Amir goes to a mausoleum as Rob instructed him to and learns that Lori died. He collects the bottle of wine as instructed. Rob enters the bakery and speaks to the woman who used to be the baker in his restaurant. The bakery was originally Rob and Lori's restaurant. He asks her if she has a salted baguette, which she gives him. They embrace and he leaves. Rob and Amir drive back to Amir's home. They quietly enter the house and go into the kitchen. They commence preparing a meal, with Amir following Rob's instructions and working alongside him. Amir asks his father to join them for dinner. He resists until Amir insists. Rob pours the wine, which he says Amir collected. Darius tastes the wine and savors the food. He is reduced to tears as the memory of a happy time with his wife comes flooding back. Darius rushes from the room overwhelmed with emotion. He tells Rob to get out of his house. Rob explains that he remembers every meal he has ever cooked and every person he has ever served. Darius apologizes to Rob that he was not able to save Pig from the junkies who cruelly mistreated her. Pig died from her injuries. Rob collapses to the floor in a state of deep sorrow and grief. A devastated Amir watches them both. Amir and Rob drive away. Rob is quietly distraught and tells Amir he is responsible for the death of Pig, because he chose to look for her and by doing so placed her in danger. Amir tries to console him. Rob tells Amir he will walk the rest of the way back to the cabin in the forest. He offers his hand to Amir to shake on their deal to see him every Thursday to collect the truffles. Amir sits in his car, deep in thought. He is no longer as brash and shallow in attitude after all he has witnessed in the last few days. Rob stands on the bank of the fast-flowing river, in the cold light of the morning. He slowly approaches the open door of the cabin and enters. His beloved friend is not there to greet him. The first thing Rob sees in the hut is the cassette on the table and finds the courage to play it. He sits on the edge of his bed in the quiet space and sadly listens to the song his wife Lori once sang for his birthday. He slowly removes his boots and looks upwards. In his reverie he hears birdsong and the sound of pigs snuffling and grunting in the forest as the river flows swiftly. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thanks and see you again soon.